a session where we have a work session, and this will be on the annual budget. And Kathleen, are you going to start it off, or is it going to be Emily, or you take it away and introduce whomever?
Okay, thank you, and good morning, Council. And as you can see, we have many of my colleagues on this morning as well. They are all the experts in the information that's being presented today, as well as the finance team, and of course our budget director, Emily Svetsig. So we can get started. This is the 2022 annual budget work session. Next slide, please. So the goals for today is to just briefly go over the annual budget process, a summary of all the new funding requests that were submitted by departments and offices, the challenges that we're facing, and the general fund overview, recommendations that I'm making to the council for your consideration, 2022 property tax levy options, and then of course available to answer any questions and receive any feedback from the council. Excuse me, next slide. And one more slide. So this is just an outline of our calendar for the budget process. It feels like we were just talking about budget as we were doing the supplemental last week. So both of these processes have been going on at the same time with staff, which does take a lot of staff time. So I do appreciate everybody's work on this. The departments and offices submitted their recommendations and requests on August 2nd. The budget office and myself met with all the departments to go over their requests, and I also met with the finance team. Today is the work session to present the recommendations. The actual budget hearing, the first meeting is on Monday, the 15th of November. This is an opportunity for the elected officials to provide testimony on the budget. And then the 16th on Tuesday is when public testimony will be received and the public hearing will take place. If needed, we also have Wednesday the 17th scheduled if we need to have additional time either for public testimony or council deliberation. Next slide. Just as a brief history, as I know some of our counselors are a little newer, starting in 2019, Clark County did transition back to an annual budget process, and this is in compliance with the RCW 36.40. In 2018, the Budget Office conducted research on the biennial versus an annual budget process. Information was collected, discussed, and analyzed on best practices, pros and cons of the methods, and what other counties were doing within the state and why. In July of 2019, the interim county manager at the time did fully support and recommend the transition from biennial budgeting to annual budgeting. The council accepted and approved this change in May of 2018 for the January 19 budget. The county uses a traditional budgeting approach that focuses on the principles of transparency, communication, and collaboration in order to optimize resource allocation. Each year, the budget is prepared employing the baseline method, which starts with the current annual budget and applies some adjustments. All the new requests for items not included in baseline must be submitted by departments and offices through change requests, which were also known as decision packages. So any changes to the budget go through this process for consideration. Just briefly going over the roles and responsibilities, we have a lot of stakeholders in our budget process. Of course, the council is the county's legislative authority and implements policy by allocating funding to departments and elected offices. The council is ultimately responsible for adopting an annual budget. The county manager, of course, I take the direction from the council with regards to policy and work with the budget office to coordinate and prepare the county budget. The finance team consists of the county manager, the budget director, finance director, and chief deputy treasurer. Their areas of expertise are invaluable. They really do come to the table with a different lens and to make sure that we're not missing anything. And while the department finance managers and support staff are not on that team, they are also an intricate part of that review process. The county manager, departments, and offices of elected officials are responsible for providing all the data for the budget preparation. So like I said, all the requests that are coming forward is really the work of the staff and the departments and the elected officials. And finally, the role of the budget office. they actually facilitate and manage the entire process. So they are constantly coordinating with all the offices and departments and myself and the council. So they are making sure that we're getting everything done on time, that it meets current regulations, if there's restricted funding, if it's ongoing, so they're really looking at it from a lens to make sure we're in compliance as well. The main purpose in the preparation of the budget reports is to satisfy the legal requirements of the state and aid both myself and the council with decision-making tools. While this is a legal regulation, I do think it's also really important that we're providing these reports for transparency for not only the council, but for the public. The Budget Office produces standard reports for the annual and supplemental budget processes. The reports can be found on our website. If you go into the clerk.wa.gov and then go under the departments for budget, and constituents can find all the budget reports. There are 3 reporting stages. The annual budget process goes into the first of the department budget submittal stage, which represents the complete picture of the new funding requests that we receive from the departments and offices. Today is the second stage where I'm doing recommendations with the council. And then finally, again, the council will adopt a budget. The Budget Office prepares 3 official reporting documents during the annual budgeting process. These reports are prepared and published at each of the 3 reporting stages. The first one is the revenues by fund report. The second one is expenditure by fund and expenditure by function and fund reports. And Exhibit B, which is the change request narratives with the summary by fund report. And then the Budget Office also produces the revenue and expense line item detailed reports once the council has adopted the annual budget. These reports break down the entire adopted budget into function, department, and ledger account details. So for this new, this annual budgeting process, we had received 141 change requests. They are split into the categories that you can see on your screen. Previously approved by the council are 23. We have 19 budget neutral, 1 technical adjustment, 1 budget intervention, 20 carry forward, 77 new requests. As we move forward in this process, I'll do an overview of the carry forward and the previously approved by council, because those you certainly have seen and have discussed prior, just in light of time, and then focus on the budget neutral and the new requests, just so that we can be mindful of everybody's time. So challenges that we continue to face for 2022, and this unfortunately has been a challenge as well historically. As you know, we have a general fund deficit where our expenses continue to exceed our revenues, rising cost of salaries and benefits, increasing demand for services, outdated systems and infrastructure, and depleted real estate excise tax 1 funding. This is just a pie chart that's really showing our revenue categories, the major revenue categories. So the large blue, bluish green, teal section on the right side is property taxes. So 42% of our revenue for general fund baseline comes in from property taxes. Additional 27% is sales tax. And then we have intergovernmental revenues, which come from our interlocal agreements that we do with other jurisdictions that the council approves. Charges for goods and services could be like court services and other services that fall into that fund, and then some transfers. All in all, the total budgeted revenue is about $177 million. This is just looking at the revenue forecasts and assumptions. So you can see the 2022. So 2022, we had increased the property tax by 3.8% to reflect what we're currently seeing. From 2023 through 2027, you can see property taxes has an inflation rate of 2.5%. We continue to look at this and we'll adjust it accordingly based on historical trends. But just because of our property tax increase this year alone, it is a 3.8% assumption in the 2022 baseline. Sales tax, we are starting out at a 4.2% increase. And again, you can see that's a 4.2 that is allocated from 2023 to 2027. That number may go up a little bit as our sales tax continues to be strong in the county. So we'll continue to review that and adjust that in the future as needed. And just to call out on here as well that none of these revenues assume the 1% property tax for general fund. And I will say, Emily, if there's anything that I'm missing, please feel free to jump in at any time. Next slide, please. This is just a pie chart similar to the revenue that we just looked at for our expense categories. So as you can see, more than 70% of our expense categories for general fund is due to people. 48% of that is the salaries and 23% is the benefits. Contingencies are for those unknowns of salary adjustments that we look at. We have a service budget in our expense category for contracting out for services. Again, intergovernmental agreements and transfers. The transfers are really like a funnel for like if we're assisting like the mental health sales tax from the general fund or like community development, there's been some transfers there to help as well. So this is the general fund expense forecast assumption. So it's taking that pie chart again and looking out in the 6 years. So the 2022 is what's currently in baseline. This does not reflect any of the new funding requests that you are considering. And as you can see for salaries and benefits, we do have a projected growth at 3.5% and a 5% for those. And if I'm going too fast, counselors, please let me know if you have questions. This is one that you have recently seen as well in the supplemental budget process. This is a new slide that we have not historically seen. And again, I give Emily credit for putting this together because I think it really does tell what's going on in our general fund. What this shows is what is planning on our baseline budget in 2022, which has the revenue of 176.7 million and our budgeted expenses at 176.9 million. This would leave us in a $4.7 million shortfall for 2022. What we do every year and actually have done historically for many years is we put in several modifiers on how we're trying to maximize on different revenue sources or reducing our expenses to ensure that we have a balanced budget. As you'll see in a future slide, similar to the supplemental, even though we have modifiers to get us balanced for the 2022, the deficit is still real as we move forward. This is a best practice for Government Finance Officers Association recommends that governments adopt rigorous policies for all operating funds aimed at achieving and maintaining a structurally balanced budget. And by law, we have to have a balanced budget. So that is a filter that I use as I'm looking at requests. If somebody puts something in as an expense, my question is how are we going to pay for it? Where is the revenue stream? Because that is unfortunately been our reality for several years and will be as we move forward. So again, guiding principles for and the focus for 2022, again, is to look at a sustainable budget, making sure that any recommendations that we're providing or I'm providing to you today is sustainable, that we have financial flexibility so that we can respond to unknowns like a situation like COVID or any other unknowns that we may see, and also fund balance stability. The recommended budget is fiscally conservative and prioritizes limited funds with a focus on preserving our adequate reserves, new requests that benefit multiple or all departments and offices, and I would add on to that legal mandates. There are things that happen that we have to do that we don't receive funding for. Protecting critical and mandated functions, and also a budget that can fiscally sustain moving forward. Out of the 141 change requests that were brought forward, 132 are being recommended. 57 of them have a general fund impact, and 9 are not being recommended. I do want to share a quick little history. I asked Emily to go back and look at some numbers. Last year in 2021, we had 209 change requests, but if you remember, 59 of those were budget interventions, were reductions in budgets because we went through an exercise not knowing how we were going to end in 2021. So if you take out that 59, there were 150 requests coming forward. In 2020, there was 161. In 2019, 156. So 141 is definitely lower than what we've seen historically. And I do believe it's because the staff is being really mindful on what we need, what's important, what we can live without. And I do want to say, just because our numbers are going down does not mean that departments don't have requests and needs and wants in order to provide a higher level better service, more services. So it does not reflect what the true need is from the county. This reflects the budget situation that we're in and that we're being mindful of that moving forward. The next couple of slides are just the financial impact by fund. I'm actually going to move something around on my screen here a little bit. If you can go through Kristen or whoever's doing that, and I'll start going over the recommendations by funds. So if you go to the county manager recommendation request by type, it's I think on slide 26. Again, I'm going to provide a summary of the requests coming forward, not going in as much detail in the previously approved items, but I will call out some specific items. So for previously approved, we had, as you can imagine, quite a few ARPA requests. They include everything from putting money aside for small projects for ARPA funding, the project position that was previously approved to manage the ARPA funding requests, Zoom licenses for our courts and others, ARPA funding for project positions, both in indigent defense as well as the PA's office to ensure that they can go through the workload historically due to COVID, a full refresh of our network system and IT, and of course, public health funding and supporting public health and COVID as we move forward. Public health also had additional requests that were recently approved regarding money that came from the federal support, or there was a federal support of STD prevention program that the council recently saw, as well as ongoing state foundational public health grants and services. So there was quite a few funding mechanisms that recently have hit. And then in addition, there were some contracts that are previously approved by the council that require an annual approval. Janitorial contract is one of them, increasing their funds. The contract was actually approved previously, but we approved that increase every year. Rental rates for the family law annex that was approved earlier back, actually that was back in 2018. Budget capacity in anticipation for the vegetation management receiving a grant from Ecology, and adjusting the inmate medical budget to match the contract. This was a contract in the jail for the medical contract. This is a one-time increase for $888,000 that was previously approved. Technical adjustments, we only have one that's being recommended this year, and it is correcting funding that was distribution for the management analyst senior position in Superior Court. Carry forwards, again, there's quite a few ARPA or COVID specific, and I will hit, I would say probably 80 or 90% of these are COVID. Space planning that was approved using COVID or ARPA funding, community development resources, both for upgrading the permit center as well as communicating with our community on how they can continue to provide services electronically as well. We have community development that has, oh, that's a different one. My apologies. The emergency rental assistance, if you can see, there are about $30 or $40 million that was previously approved. It's a grant for emergency rental assistance from the U.S. Department Treasury through Washington State Department of Commerce. And this is for rental, utility, and other household expenses as outlined by the grantor. So the three from community services that show that they're all $10 million. They're all a little bit different in the funding and where it's coming from, but they're all directly related to rental assistance due to COVID. DCS also received and spent the funds allocated through ARPA funding awarded by the federal government. These funds were expanded outreach, motel vouchers, housing assistance for homeless and other shelter capacity. That was about $11.5 million. Carry forward funds to implement the Emergency Solutions COVID grant. This supports communities in providing street outreach, emergency shelter, rental assistance, and related services. Increase budget authority for the Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program, American Rescue Program, which is LIHEAP ARP grant. This funding is to provide assistance to residents at the federal poverty level and their utility bills. Community Services also has a Community Development Block Grant Coronavirus second round funds from CARES Act, funding assistance to low and moderate income persons to respond to COVID pandemic. There are other ones from Community Services that you all have seen, and I will say again, and I said this in the supplemental, Community Services, their staff have really stepped up. They have been challenged, I think, to the max with their staff. I have never heard one complaint from them, and they have gotten more money and resources in our community than the entire state of Oregon, and they are on the leading edge in the state of Washington as well. I can't say enough about that group. They have really hit our community directly during the last year and a half. Other
Vanessa and team. Sorry.
I'm sorry. What was that?
Had to interject that. I see she's on, and we really do appreciate your management as well as your hardworking team. Thank you.
Thank you. Other projects for carry forward include, like you said, the space planning. Community Development requested $30,000 to complete a review and update of the critical areas ordinance in 2022. This was originally approved in 2021. RCW requires a periodic review in conjunction with the review of the comp plan. Another one was continuation of the event center at the fairgrounds master plan. The existing plan is outdated. A new master plan will be based upon an updated assessment of need, market opportunities, public input, site resources, and capacity. So this is a carry forward to continue that effort. Also some carry forward for facility projects that aren't quite complete yet or in the middle of getting done. So any unused funding will be carried forward to next year. One-time carry forward of the estimated available project expenditure balance into 2022. This is for items as the IT projects, anything like Workday, Telecom, Enterprise, Document Management, Office 365. So it's carrying forwarded any available expenditures that have not been spent. The prosecutor's case management system in 2021, the PA was given funding in the amount of $430,000 to purchase, configure, and install a criminal justice information security compliant case management system. The anticipated go live is in 2022. And then finally, Public Works did have a new Chevy Colorado for clean water that was approved. They were not able to purchase it in 2021 due to the impact of the manufacturer shortages. If we can move forward on the budget intervention, we have one, and it is using ARPA funding in the amount of $9.5 million for revenue recovery for 2022. Budget neutral request. Increased budget capacity for revenue and expenditures for ballots, return costs for postage. This is a shared cost with other jurisdictions. The amount is $130,000. Again, these are all budget neutral. Increased budget capacity for the Crest Emergency Management tax revenue by $495,000. ARPA funding for the clerk's office to support conversation with LibertyNet to, conversion from LibertyNet to OnBase, $65,000. If you remember, we did do a one-time cost last year to get them starting with that conversion. It is effective on January 1st. Increased budget authority to reflect the increase in the shelter program grant funding for existing services to support individuals with immediate housing needs and $2.6 million. Community Services also has an increased budget authority for proposed grant by the Washington State Department of Commerce pass-through funds from Treasury to contract with local service providers to implement rental assistance program. Funding has not been received yet, or it was coming late fall, early winter in amount of $35 million. I'm not sure if DCS has actually received those fundings yet. Based on my last update with them, they had not. Budget capacity for a grant agreement with Ecology Solid Waste Management Community for Community Litter Cleanup Program and Clark County District Court Community Restitution. This was also previously approved in 2021, but that was only for 2021 only, so that's why it's on the 2022 budget neutral. Budget capacity for $250,000 to accept a Washington State Department of Agricultural grant. Every year they provide a health and safety grant to the fairgrounds. The grant must be applied for the maximum amount, and the maximum amount has to be under $250,000. The grant application decision will come in after our budget is adopted, so this is a placeholder for that. ARPA funding for COVID cleaning services for the courts. We did do this last year as well. They've also used other funding historically. This is for $239,000. Update budget capacity for increased Tri-Mountain Golf revenues and expenditures in the amount of just over $86,000. ARPA funding to support a 2-year project term employed to provide Office 365 application support. As you know, we've had a lot of people going remote. There are other applications on Office 365 that are available but not yet accessible. So this will help provide that assistance and support so that we can fully utilize all the applications and hopefully increase our efficiency. Utilize ARPA funding for a 2-year desktop administrator project position. Industry standard does state that the number of computers each administrator can support is up to 275 devices without seeing negative impacts. Currently, 5 out of the 8 administrators are well above the 275 devices. And so we have been replacing hundreds of desktops with laptops ahead of the normal replacement schedule. IT is also requesting one-time ARPA funding in the amount of just over $263,000 to complete the upgrade of the document imaging application. This is the conversion for LibertyNet to OnBase. Juvenile detention alternatives initiatives JDI grant funding to help continue the fund costs related to the detention alternatives program. The amount is just over $28,000. You probably remember, well, I remember this. We just approved in the fall supplemental last week for the 2021 amount, so this is for 2022. Recommend approval of a project program coordinator position for communications for public health. And on this one, and I don't think it's under the no recommendations, but there was a request for a program coordinator too for the public health vital records program. That will not be recommended as included in other grant funding that has been presented to the council. There's also approval for a 0.2 FTE reduction to a public health nurse 2 position to align the budget with the position. Transfer 0.2 FTE from the MEO's office, which is the medical examiner, to the public health vital records program due to the workload increase and efficiencies. Update grant and fee revenue and associated controllable expenditures for projections in solid waste. Increase budget capacity for security costs at the Center of Community Health. The revenue will be collected from the tenants out in that building. Adjust expenditures authority to Superior Court to accept a federal pass-through grant award from Commerce. These funds support the Clark County Court appointed Special Advocate or CASA program. This grant award was $75,000 for the period of July 1, 2021 through June 30, 2022. The amount for 2022 is $37,500. And then finally, on the budget neutral request, budget capacity to accept an AOC grant for the UGA appointed services in Superior Court. So for the new request, again, we have quite a few here, so I will try to be as succinct as possible. Request to retain project FTE to ongoing FTE to support senior and disabled exemptions. We did not hire, or the assessor's office was unable to hire in 2022 due to our hiring freeze, or 2020 due to the hiring freeze due to COVID. So the recommendation that I'm putting forward is actually not to convert that to an ongoing FTE, but to continue as a project employee as it's still within the time frame in the policy and CBA. There is also the request to convert a project FTE residential appraisal position to a regular FTE. Again, we were not able to hire in 2020 due to the hiring freeze, so the recommendation before the council is to continue that as a project employee. Approve updates to the cost allocation plan for the revenue to general fund and expense for the departments that have received central services. Just as a reminder, this used to be in the baseline that was presented to the council, and for transparency purposes for the council and the public, we do pull these out in a separate package now. Regional Disaster Preparedness, the RDPO increase in association dues. Again, this is one that you did approve recently in the supplemental. This is the 2022. There was an increase in just over 2,000 due to the increase in population in Clark County. Increase to supplies and services budget for yearly telecom charges and new recording fees that have been implemented. And this is amount of $2,500. And you will see that there's a couple departments in here that are looking at these yearly telecom charges. I'm hoping, I've had conversations with staff of how can we consolidate that maybe in the future. It can be a little bit difficult just based on the differences in the departments, but there is a bunch of little small requests like that that you'll see here shortly. Update the debt fund payment schedule for 2022 in order to account for the obligations based on the data provided by the Treasurer's Office. Utilize the 1% property tax levy for 2022. This comes to just under $700,000 of revenue to general fund. This does support ongoing operations in the county. It's a stable fund that we receive stable revenues. And this also helps fund our law and justice, which is the largest portion of our general fund. Add just over $38,000 to the parks fund by allowing a 1% increase to the MPD Parks Fund property tax levy for 2022. This fund actually will assist in bridging the gap for district parks. The road fund, adding additional $441,000 to the road fund revenue by utilizing the allowed 1% road fund property tax for 2022. This pays for constructing, repairing, improving, and maintaining county roads and bridges. Additionally, this was part of the 179th funding conversation that the council previously had that included a 1% road fund property tax to help support that funding. Last year, the council did opt not to utilize the full 1%. There was an option to do a less than 1%, which the council adopted. Increase the amount budgeted to transfer funds from general fund to the local revitalization fund that is attributed to sales activity taking place within the boundaries of the 179th Street LURF Fund. That amounts about $19,000.
Kathleen?
Yes.
May I just ask one question here about the road fund? What is that amount? That you would
The one.
that 1%.
1% road fund is $441,718.
Thank you.
Yep. Convert two project mental health sales tax positions to permanent positions. This is in the clerk's office, judicial proceedings specials, and court assistants. It will still be paid out of mental health sales tax. I do want to just make a quick comment about FTE requests. We did not receive a lot of FTE requests, but my lens was, can we sustain that funding? And with general fund, we can't sustain that. So you'll see some of the recommendations are project positions where are time limited. There are a couple of ongoing, this being one that is a mental health sales tax. There's another mental health sales tax request in the juvenile, and then there is one general fund ongoing in district court, and that is something that's mandated by law. It's a legal change. But overall, part of creating a budget recommendation that is fiscally sustainable, I did try, and also looking at equity countywide as well, not recommending ongoing FTE, and most of the departments did not put forward a lot of ongoing FTE requests. CRESA increased their rates for their radios and dispatch fees to their customers. The rates were established in October of 2020 for the 2021 rates. It was approved one time for 2021, so this is just adjusting the baseline for 2022 and ongoing. The amount is just under $2,300. Move stormwater position from the permit center to development engineering. It just makes sense to put that in another position or in another area based on the work that they're providing. District Court requesting to add one, here's the ongoing one FTE Corrections Program Associate Lead and one FTE Program Manager 1. Due to new legislation in 2020, District Court Probation Services now must monitor when an individual enters restricted areas of a victim or protected party or within the restricted area of a designated location under the new law change. So this requires monitoring and victim notification. Again, this is the only ongoing general fund FTE request that's being recommended. They actually did bring this forward last year, and I had conversations with them to see like how long could we wait to not put this in ongoing. And so they were great in working with me last year, and then the request is being recommended during the 2020 annual budget. The amount is about $171,000. We have a house out in Washougal, just on north of Washougal. The property contains an active Crescent Tower site. The house was used as a rental, but has not been occupied since 2012. The structures were secure, but we've had several incidents of vandalism, and it's increasing a liability of the county. And so they are looking at demolishing this house. The amount is $45,000. I did have staff reach out to the fire district out there to see if they wanted to use it as a training opportunity, but it is in a location that would not be safe for both the firefighters and neighboring locations. So we'll move forward with this recommendation. New facility projects in the amount of $865,000. Example, the products include but are not limited to the medical examiner door freezer replacement, juvenile alarms, juvenile shower resurfacing, and other projects. Increase the facilities budget to cover the increased charges by the utility companies. So our utilities have increased. I believe we've absorbed it the last 2 or 3 years, so this we're not able to absorb it any further. Supplies and materials, as you have seen in the industry, in the community with building, they have increased this past year. Wood prices have increased by 180%. Metal prices increased by more than 30%. And other equipment and products have seen an increase between 3 and 13%. I know initially facilities was hoping for an ongoing. I am recommending, and it may have been changed in the package as a one-time request to cover the cost of this increase. And then we'll continue to assess this to make sure that the prices come back down. If not, then we can look at that in our future supplemental. Update amounts budgeted for general liability, calculated charges. These are a lot of our insurance and general liability ones that we're going to hear about. Again, the primary driver, the rate increase, is the cost increase of the county's insurance rates by nearly $1.3 million. This does not include the property or cyber insurance. Those are in a later package. Rates and charges are updated every year based on actuary reports and projected expenses. This fund is for risk mitigation, loss prevention, and control services, purchases of insurances and bonds, litigation expenses, etc. Increase in workers' compensation expenditure budget in the amount of $70,000. This is due to the state implementing COLA increases of 10.1% to all the workers on time loss. This increase can be covered by our existing fund balance. Update amounts budgeted for general liability costs to accommodate increase in cyber insurance premiums, which have increased by 191%. This equates to just over $63,000, and this can be covered within existing fund balance. Increase in workers' comp excess insurance, which is seeing an increase of at least 40% starting in November 2021. Increase is due to the natural disasters, COVID, cyber ransom attacks, and civil unrest, both local or all locally, nationally, and globally. This request is just over $31,000 and also can be covered by the existing fund balance. An increase in property insurance rates and expense budget in the amount of $80,000. This increase will be covered by our fund balance as well. Increase in risk legal expense authority in the amount of $2 million due to increase in claims and legal fees. This increase will be covered by the assigned fund balance that the council did award in 2021. If you remember, there were 3 assigned fund balances that you did, and this one was 10 million. So the 2 million would be recommended taking out of that 10 million. Increase in expense authority in the workers' compensation policy for the teleworkers. We do have employees who work from home in Oregon, and to make sure that we're covered, the amount is just over $8,000 for 2022 and will be covered by existing fund balance. Budget capacity for indigent defense to work on cases coming from the Blake decision in the amount of $240,000. Print shop equipment replacement to support county printing operations is a one-time $47,000 and ongoing $2,000. Increase expense authority by $9,000 to account for the yearly PAX software maintenance increase. This is the system that the assessor and treasurer depend on for the property tax and assessment application. Update the countywide technology equipment repair and replacement service and storage rates. Collection amounts are based on the 2020 actuals and are distributed to departments based on the current computer counts as of June of 2021. This is also one that used to be part of baseline, and for transparency purposes, we have been presenting them since last budget in a decision package for transparency. Increase expenditure budget in the amount of $1,200 to account for the yearly Questa budget book annual software maintenance increase. IT is also asking for an additional $4,000 to cover the recent telecom system cost increase. IT, there's a comprehensive, okay, so this is the Clark County Land Management System. So I do want to say a couple words about this. Last year in the budget process, I did not recommend any of these packages. And I stated I would like to have a review on what the current or the original RFP was, the current process, the contract, what have we done, and what do we need to do. Stephen Young in IT, who's a project manager, did do that review, presented the information to the finance team and myself, as well as the department directors. He did a great job on that review. Is exactly what we're looking for, and working with all the staff who have been part of this process. When the budget requests came in, they were coming in from different departments because this impacts more than just one department. Mike Sprinkle took it upon himself, he's our IT director, to consolidate this package into one package for consideration to help provide that transparency and clarity. We also have 2 project managers now who will be working under Mike Sprinkle that will help manage this process moving forward to ensure that we can stay on track and get the deliverables. Excuse me, I gotta take water. Sorry, my mouth's getting dry. And so I do want to say this was extremely time consuming and difficult project, but it was very important to ensure that we can get the best product out to the community and the resources. So these packages underwent, again, the thorough review. This request is for a one-time funding of about $1.7 million for the entire program. The program includes e-plan review, business process projects such as code enforcement, animal control, fire marshal, clean water, yearly maintenance cost increase, and continuous improvement and configuration service agreement. Again, I'd like to thank Stephen, Mike, and the entire team for taking all the time and effort. This is also using ARPA funding. It uses some general fund, it's community development funding, and a few others. So it's, when I was going through these packages, this one, and just reviewing in preparations for tonight, this one like warmed my heart because of all the labor and love that have gone into this to get this moving forward in the right way. Juvenile technology, telephone, cell phone increase also request general fund reimbursement for the law library indirect costs per their MOU. Estimated cost is about $4,000. The PA's office is requesting 2 FTE for the body camera and dash cam initiative. I would be recommending that these be contingent on funding, much like I did with the sheriff's office last year. And these are FTE would be a program assistant for the civil division to respond to the public records request, and a department information system coordinator 1 position to assist with technical issues related to the PA's office process of these pieces of evidence. Additional telecom expenses, again, in the PA's office, that's the one that there's like it's about $3,000 that's hitting some of our departments this year. Update revenue budget allocations for environmental public health based on the current fee schedule, which was approved in 2020 and implemented in January 1, 2021. Update and public health again, update the revenue budget allocations for environmental public health based on the fee schedule approved in October 21 by the Clark County Board of Health and implemented or will be implemented January 1, 2022. Funding of the medical office use due to caseload. Okay, funding for the medical examiner's office due to caseload and staff turnover. So this was previously approved, and this will be moved, I believe. Oh, it was already only approved in 2021, not for 2022. So the council already approved a 1 FTE 24-month autopsy technician project position, as well as an OA3 to help with the medical examiner due to the staff turnover. Update traffic impact fee budget. This helps fund the transportation improvement program that's approved by the council. One-time expense authority in the amount of $28.2 million and net revenue adjustment of $15.1 million in county road fund to fund projects in 2022 annual construction program, which is also goes in front of the council. Ongoing review and the adjustments of this fund may be made in the fall supplemental. Park impact fee budget update, including baseline revenue update, baseline revenue budget, capital outlay budget, and expenditure budget in the park impact fee to better align with the available cash balances. This request will facilitate acquisition and development of park property in Clark County. One-time reallocation of position budgets to allow for public works staff to direct charge to parks and clean water capital projects. This is a new request, but it is really more of a technical adjustment on how they're accounting for that time and funding. Budget authority to allow project expenditures to occur during 2022 for the Tlachi Prairie Railroad projects in the amount of $2.1 million. Net increase of $1 million in reallocation of baseline expense and clean water fund to implement the stormwater capital plan for 2022. Additional funding for stormwater facility maintenance and repairs in the amount of $126,000 in public works. One-time expense from the equipment rental and revolving fund for $16,400 for a new vehicle air conditioned machine. So this is needed due to be compatible with new vehicles. The technology has changed within the last 5 years, so we don't have all the tools to maintain this in our current fleet. Expense authority in the amount of $7.6 million for 121 vehicles or pieces of equipment that have been identified on the replacement schedule for 2022. In conversations with Public Works and EVA, this is a highly aspirational request. This would be during normal times, but as you know, with some of the fleet, there is a delay due to COVID and resources. But this, in a normal year, this is what they would be doing, and we'll adjust that in the future if we need to. Approved fleet charges for 2022. That includes parts, labor, capital, and administration. This was new last year as well, as this was part of the baseline, and we're doing this again for transparency for both the council and the public. One-time purchase of 4 automated fuel dispensing systems. Expense will be reimbursed by the road fund. This will ensure sufficient controls are in place. Council did previously approve, but the cost estimate has increased. The system will also eliminate the need for staff to manually reconcile transactions, which will result in a saving of 10 to 12 hours per month. Increased fleet service expense authority in the amount of $1.1 million due to automotive industry shortage of microchip and other COVID delays. Approval of one-time budget authority and ongoing ER&R to purchase a 2-ton pickup truck for the roads operations median maintenance crew. As a result of new construction, the county added over 200 bioretention facilities, an increase of 133%. The vehicle is necessary to meet the work demands as well as compliance with the MPDES Phase 1 municipal stormwater permit. One-time funding from the road fund to replace the vegetation management spray truck platform, including the console, tank, pumps, hoses, and other apparatus. This truck was initially purchased in 2003 with the spray pumps. The truck was actually replaced in 2016, but there was not enough budget to replace the associated spray platform. So that equipment is about almost 20 years old, and it's continually breaking down, resulting in lost work time. So this would be the most efficient option moving forward. Authorize expense authority in the amount of $400,000 for master planning efforts at Camp Bonneville. A master plan is in accordance with the reuse plan and is fully funded by the Timber Fund. Authorize in Public Works $8.1 million in capital spending authority for conservation futures bond projects in 2022. This was originally authorized by resolution in 2017 and 18. This will fund previously approved projects, including but not limited to the Lewis River Ranch, Lake Ranch, as well as farm preservation and easements for Mason Creek. Request $1.1 million from REIT 2, Real Estate Excise Tax 2, for one-time major maintenance in region and district park sites. This includes items such as restrooms, picnic shelters, playgrounds, parking lots, and walkways. One-time capital expense authority to fund the projects outlined in the 2022 Parks Capital Improvement Program. Some of those examples include Camp Hope, Curtin Creek, Hawkinson Disc Golf Course, etc. A one-time fund dollars in the amount of $90,000 to help support the Heritage Farm business plan. This amount may change as we move forward in the process for that, but we wanted to make sure we had the capacity. $60,000 ongoing funding to pay the City of Vancouver stormwater utility fees at 4 county parks. Curtin Springs, Wildlife Habitat, Harmony Sports Complex, Vancouver Lake Regional Park, and Frenchman Bar are all in the City of Vancouver limits, and therefore we need to pay the stormwater utility fees. One-time expense authority in the amount of $50,000 in road fund for the second half of the non-national bridge inventory. The initial half of this work was approved in 2021. Purchase of 2 Ventrac 4500 heavy-duty field mowers to be used for vegetation management. The current mowers are not adequately equipped. They are considered light duty and are frequently breaking down. Purchase will be through the fleet services and billed to the road fund. Cost of contract was terminated with Superior Court this last year. Superior Court did an RFP. This asks us for an additional $225,000 to cover the difference between the budget and the contract. There are also other budget revenues that come in to help support that program through grants. Superior Court is asking for a new OA3 to provide administrative support. This was recommended last year as a project position for 2 years. I think that's this one. Oh no, this one I am actually recommending as a project position rather than an ongoing. Add new judicial assistant to Superior Court to support commissioners. Currently, they have 1 JA supporting 3.5 commissioners. I recommend a project position for this. Both the OA and the judicial assistant can help provide some data for Superior Court as we move forward in future budget cycles. There's a request to convert the Therapeutic Court's grant-funded FTE from grant funding to mental health sales tax. This will allow the court to continue necessary efforts to assist families involved in child welfare through specialized evidence-based approaches. Increase in expenditure authority to cover the increase in technology to support the judicial process in the amounts of just over $16,000. This is like for Zoom licenses. Increase ongoing spending authority in the real estate excise and property tax administration assistance fund for the Treasurer's Office Tax Service Division. The use of the specialized fund is authorized by the RCW and can be used only for specific purposes. This will allow the Treasurer's Office to fund future qualifying items based on the funds available, including but not limited to systems maintenance and needed technology infrastructure. And then finally, on the new request, decrease budgeted property tax penalty revenue in the amount of $978,000 as a one-time adjustment as a result of House Bill 1410, which eliminates the assessment of penalties on property taxes during 2022. The Treasurer will continue to monitor and will provide updates in future forecasts. And then finally, there are a few items that are not being recommended today in the 2022 budget. The first one is the utilization of bank capacity for road fund property taxes. That's an amount of $1.45 million. Utilizing the 1% conservation futures property tax levy for 2022. This would be banked for future years. Currently, I've had conversations with the finance team and Eva. There's currently enough funds in the Conservation Future funds. Public Works is currently conducting analysis of this fund as well, and will be coming back to the council with more information. I'm not recommending using bank capacity for Conservation Future property taxes or utilizing bank capacity for the MPD Parks Fund. Fire Marshal training travel funds in the amount of $8,000 of general funds. They've had money in their budget to help support their training. I will call it, they did note in their request that our HR policy does recommend a 1 to 3% of salary should be used for training and travel. I wholeheartedly agree with this, but unfortunately, when we're faced with a deficit, this is unfortunately one of those items that we cannot recommend moving forward. Sheriff's Office did submit a package for anticipated overtime expenses in 2022 in the amount of $1.7 million. While I'm not recommending this now, the overtime audit in the auditor's office is still not complete. We will monitor this next year and if needed, put it into a supplemental budget. Convert Department Information Systems Coordinator 2 project positions in Superior Court to permanent. So this was approved last year as a 2-year project. I'm not recommending permanent at this time, but I'm supportive of the second year of the project. And then the second position is converting Department Management Analyst Senior project position in Superior Court to permanent. Again, this was approved and recommended last year as a 2-year project. I'm not recommending an ongoing permanent position at this time, but I'm supportive of their continuing efforts next year. And then finally, Superior Court does have some overtime with regards to their judicial assistance employees. Again, still waiting for the countywide audit program, and we will address this if necessary in the supplemental next year. And with that, that is a summary of our current recommendations this year for 2022. So I'm going to take a pause to see if there's any questions from the council at this time before we move forward.
Do we have questions from the council for clarification?
Madam Chair.
Councilor.
So Kathleen, just really briefly, I know when we talked about the road fund and the NPD fund, I assume that over the next number of months, as we start to roll out the rest of the budget process, that will get us an independent specific work session on both of those funds.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
Madam Chair,
Councilor Bauer.
just a comment, not a question at this time. This is a obvious huge amount of work, and I'd just like to say congratulations and thank you to Kathleen and staff. It's very clear, and you went into a huge amount of detail very quickly and very clearly, and thank you for all of that. And there's so much here to comment on that is really exciting for the county, but I've got to say one just really stands out to me, and that's the Clark County Land Management System program. I just think that's going to add so much to what we can offer the community. So thank you for everything.
Ditto. Other comments or questions? Okay.
If I may just comment, Madam Chair.
Councilor Mathew.
So just basically to add to what Karen and I think the chair just mentioned, this is a profoundly complex and difficult process. And this is first and foremost a great example of why we need a professional manager, not as the Charter Commission looked at converting it to an elected position. And it was unfortunate that the Charter Commission didn't come to any of the electeds initially to kind of begin their process. But Kathleen, thank you so much. We may not agree on everything that's here, recommended or disapproved, but this just shows the professionalism of your team and your leadership as a true professional in the budget process. Thank you so much.
I appreciate the kind words, but I will have to pass that on to my colleagues who are on. They are the ones that are doing the work day in and day out, as well as providing the information. And I know, I think I said this before, I'm just in a position that I'm honored to share their story and the work that they're doing in the community.
Thank you.
Any
Okay,
other questions?
Chair.
Councilor Lance.
Kathleen, we've been waiting for the results of the overtime study for quite some time, as I recall. I think about the length of time I've been on the council. Do we have an ETA? I know that you're not the one, you're not performing it. So, but do we know when we're going to get that?
Yeah, so I have had a couple of updates over the last year, and I did ask Mark Gassaway this last week for another update, and he says they are, his understanding that they're in the final drafting stages of the report.
Excellent.
I will
have another
continue to
question.
follow up.
Thank you. Another question about the package related to indigent defense for COVID backlog. My understanding is that this is essentially the partner package to the PA's office to get everything up to speed. I know that there are a lot more problems with our pipeline for defense attorneys as far as folks who have the capacity to take on these projects. So this is more of a pin for a future discussion. I think it's great. We need this, and we need to make sure that we have both of those packages operating in sync. But I hope that we can, and we can talk about this further offline. I'd like to keep an eye on this to the extent that we have trouble actually meeting the need with the contract attorneys that we have. And if there are changes that we need to make in, next year in the supplemental in order to make sure that we are keeping pace, I'd love to stay on top of that, because I know that it can be a very unbalanced system if we're not watching it carefully.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, can I just add a point to what Councilor Lynch just said?
Go ahead.
Thank you. So I'm still looking for an opportunity to kind of get over the hump to create a public defender office at some point, because I think ultimately, once it's in place, we're going to reap so much efficiency and a substantively better process for providing public defense. And so it's just that initial organization. Where do we get the money to start a public defense office that is really very well established throughout our country and nearly every other county? So I want to keep that. I know there's so much on our plate and on your plate particularly, and just the mentioning of the overtime, yeah, it's been that the entire time I've been on the council too. We've been waiting to see the outcome of that. There's so much to do, and I know you're tilting out a lot of windmills, but public defense is something, indigent defense, we need to really figure out how to best utilize our tax dollars to provide the very best public defense out there. And I think a public defense model, whether it's led by a nonprofit or some other, there's different models, but we are so far behind in trying to figure this out. And the idea of having 70 or 80 or 90 individual contractors it's just inefficient on its face. So I just wanted to add that I'm hoping that we can revisit that major change.
Thank you, Councilor Medpiji. Although I think when we looked at the change, it did not look very good to create a indigent defense office here at the county. It looked like a huge, huge expense. So I'm not sure that we would receive the kind of efficiency that you're looking for. You probably have a whole lot more experience in looking at all of this, but from what I recall from our investigation into it, it was just way over the top that we could not do that. And it did not prove to be more efficient, and in fact was more costly. So we did look at this for quite some time. So, and with regard again to the comments of both Councilor Lentz and Medvigi on this audit of overtime, it has taken a very long time, and I'm hoping that we can put some grease to the skids here and get her done, so to speak. Thank you.
So we just didn't have the capability and expertise that we now have in our county manager to look at new efficiencies and new programming. I'm just asking that we revisit it and not push it off the table, because we really are in the vast minority in the United States for how we provide indigent defense.
Okay, can I proceed?
Yes,
The
please.
next slide? Okay, thank you. So this is the general fund forecast with the assumptions. This version does include the 1% property tax levy that's being recommended. So the 2021, that's the one you saw last week. That line, that's the current adopted budget at the top, has the, I don't know if you want me to go through the 2021. So the 2022 one is the baseline budget that's being recommended. If you can see just below, so the budgeted revenue, the green is about 176.7 million in revenue and 176.9 million in expenses. If you go down under the modifiers, this is what we do to get us in a balanced budget. We're constantly trying to find ways to bring money in, and then if there's any other items that we need to call out. So the $1,500, that was the ongoing from the fall supplemental. So that was all that was recommended, that was ongoing. 8.88 million is what's being recommended today. If you look to the right of that, you'll see 1.6 is ongoing. So the majority of the recommendations today are one-time expenses. The 1% property tax increase equates to about 685,000 and new revenue coming in. The 2.1 million there, the 2.7 million, the savings, that's the PERS, that's the Public Employee Retirement System. They changed their structure for this coming year, regarding the amount that needs to be paid into that system. So that saves the county about 2.2 million. The revenue loss of jail bed revenues. So I'm going to say this, and Emily can correct me if I'm saying wrong. There was a question about budgeting this. So this is not, the jail bed revenues are not in the baseline budget. All this is doing is recognizing and projecting the loss of revenue so that we can account for it, but it is not included in the baseline budget. So with that, the modifiers equal about 9.5 million, bringing us to a projecting ending fund balance of just under 40 million. Go down in the green, you can see that the projected ending fund balance is that 39.5 million. Our minimum fund balance per policy is 30.3 million. The assigned fund balance compensated absences, those are the invoices that we haven't received yet, but we have to account for them. And then the that's the non-spendable encumbered invoices, my apologies, 1.3. The compensated absences is the amount that we have to set aside for any folks that leave, that we have to do some payouts. We budget about 25% of what that amount would be, or that financial liability. So with what's being recommended today, we are 5.6 million above ending or minimum fund balance. I will call out though, it's because it's one time. If you see in 2023, we're not balanced, and that does not include any new requests. And as you can see from even the last 5 or 4 years that we shared, we get several requests in the budget process. So starting in 2023, we're 2.7 million not out of balance, and then out to 2027, it's up to 58 million. That's the structural deficit that we're talking about. As you know, we're looking at the ARPA funding that is one-time request. That's why we're only looking at one-time requests and not recommending ongoing funding with that. This also does not include, the forecast does not include the new juvenile detention facilities and jail tax that is on the November ballot. That would bring in about $6 million a year. I know the intention of the council is to use that for body cameras and dash cameras, but this does not reflect that revenue if it were to be approved. We'll certainly update this forecast if it does get approved. Is there any questions on this? Or Emily, is there anything else on here that we should talk about?
I think you covered everything from my perspective.
Okay.
And Madam Chair, can I make a brief comment?
Go ahead.
It bears repeating, and I'm really directing this comment to the public as well as our legislative delegation. If we took all of our bank capacity in every area, all of our ability to raise taxes in every area, it still would not overcome the historical deficit we have seen forecast in our tax leakage. And I know this has been a turbulent year and a half, going on 2 years because of the pandemic, and some of those historical forecasts are not true today, but they probably will return to normalcy after we exit the pandemic. So no matter what we do in raising taxes, we will still never come close to replacing that roughly $25 million a year we lose in our general fund to tax leakage. We need some relief by our legislature. Thank you.
Okay, if you go to the next slide, please. So this is the same forecast, but we had staff remove the 1% property tax just so that you could see what the funding difference would be. So the 600, almost 700,000 is removed. So where you can actually see is in the projection on 2023, where before it was a 2.7 million out of balance, we're now a negative 4.1 million. And then the 2027, because that does compound over years, and we were at 58.3 million, not within budget, and without the 1%, we're seeing it as $62.45 million deficit. So that's the only difference between the previous slide and this slide, so that the council and the community can see what that difference of the 1% does, and how it affects the general fund forecast. Any further questions on this one? Okay.
Questions? See none.
Okay. The next few slides are just some of the reports and the summary of where the changes are. So this is more for transparency if you certainly want to look at it, or if the community does. So if you could move forward, please, to slide 40. So these ones, these are the recommendations based on the major funds that we have. Just another way of looking at it. Some of these will be a little quicker. So this is with the road fund. So the recommended road fund request amount decreases the road fund by 4.7 million. So currently our estimated beginning balance is 22.4. You can see the revenue expense budget there, and then the projected ending fund balance would be reduced to 34.9. The revenue expenses are what's in baseline. Next slide, please. And this, I'm not going to go through all these again, but this was part of all the new requests that was recommended that I just summarized. This is what they are specifically for the road fund. It is identified also in the decision packages or the change requests that are online in your packets, so you can look at them in specific there as well. So next slide, please. So for the planning and code fund, again, the estimated beginning fund balance is at 12.5. Revenue expense budget, which is baseline, is there. What's being recommended today in the 2022 adopt would decrease by 800,000. We do have a policy, a minimum fund balance policy for this fund of 7.4 million. With that recommendation, we would still be above the minimum fund balance by 2.5 million. And again, the next slide is the specific change request that affect the planning and code recommendations. Mental health sales tax fund. The net decrease due to the recommendations is about 200,000. They do have a hefty balance in there. I know we're going to be moving forward with the mental health sales tax program and look at different funding aspects starting this next year. Lindsay will be managing that with the group that meets to discuss the plan. So again, on this one, it's per policy, the minimum fund balance is 3.9. So with the recommendations today, which both, I think the majority of them were FTE that were being covered, one in Superior Court and one in clerk's office and in juvenile. The projecting end fund balance is $10.4 million above the minimum per policy. So this is good news. It's a very healthy fund, and I know, like I said, Lindsay will be reconvening that team and working very closely with Vanessa's group because they actually help manage the RFP process, and that's been established for that team. Those are the packages that were submitted. REIT 1. Estimated beginning fund balance is 3.3 million. There's our baseline budget of the revenue expenses. What's being recommended today would reduce that by 2.6 million, leaving a projected ending fund balance of 3.9 million. This fund does not have a formal reserve policy yet, but there is a draft recommendation. Right now in the draft recommendation, it's a $3 million minimum fund balance, and we will be bringing that draft to the council in the future for your consideration. And just a note on the REIT 1 as well, the fund continues to be depleted through 2023 due to the need to rebuild for several years before the new items can be funded. This is based on that we're doing a payback, and that actually I learned yesterday there's a possibility it could be a little bit sooner, but we will keep the council apprised of that. Then we go to REIT 2. Estimated beginning fund balance is 12.9 million. The request today is 12.1. Their reserve amount per policy is 1 million, and so we are projecting an ending fund balance policy at 5.2. based on what's being recommended. So we're within policy on that. And that is a process that started a few years ago to make sure that we were being fiscally responsible by creating fund balance policies for our major funds so that we can account for the unknowns. Okay, moving on to the tax levies. So this, I know Peter and Alicia did present as well regarding how property taxes are calculated and the 1% taxes. So the primary focus of this, this is provided or established by the assessed county assessor's value, assess your property, and the treasurer collects the property taxes. The state has a budget system of the property taxation. There's 3 components of the property tax: was the levy amount, assessed value, and levy rate. Next slide, please. And furthermore, the council does adopt levies supporting the budget each year and considers the following property tax levies. So the general fund, which includes the subordinate levies. So it includes the veterans, mental health and developmental disabilities, the road fund, conservation futures, Greater Parks District, property tax, and the current baseline forecast includes growth from the new construction at 2% higher than the prior year based on the preliminary data. Property tax is stable, grows with new construction, and the possible 1% annual increase if voted for by the council. Something on my screen. Okay, so the next slide. So this shows what the property tax options are based on the recommendations. So, well, this is just what's available. So in 2021, you can see in the salmon color, that's what the council approved. The general fund and road fund was the 0.602. It was that unique year where we had to substantially justify the 1.0%. That is not the case for this year. The council didn't approve any conservation features, and then the parks at 1.94. The choices in the revenue impact for this year, you have 0%, the 1% that provides the dollar amount. There's the 685 in the general fund, and the dollar amounts for the other funds. What's available in bank capacity if the council wanted to choose, or if there's any recommendations. And then below is the actual impact on members of our community based on the median household. So as you probably remember in your conversations with Alicia and Peter, for the general fund, for the average, based on a home of 449,000, a 1% property tax will impact their taxes by $3.85 per year. And you can go down and look at the other amounts there as well, with road fund of $5.25, conservation features, and parks. If you go to the next slide, please. This is the same information, but it highlights what's being recommended, because if you remember, I'm not recommending all of them. So on the bottom, the items in yellow are the items that I'm recommending. And so the 1% general fund, 1% road fund, and the parks. I'm not wrecking bank capacity on any of the items that are available.
Kathleen,
Yes.
when you're looking at the road fund, does the road fund affect every single Clark County property owner? I don't think so. Who does it? I see.
I would think it's the unincorporated, because
Okay.
other cities
That's-
have their own
yeah,
road departments.
That's what
and
I
road funds.
assumed. So, okay,
Yes.
thank you. Appreciate it.
Of course. Any questions on this one before we go to the next slide? Okay. The next slide is just property tax information for new construction for this year. So in addition, this is all included in the baseline. The property tax increase presented in the previous slide, new construction is forecasted to bring in tax revenue in the amounts on this slide, which are again included in the baseline. Just wanted to call that out specifically. And a lot of this funds come from the employees in Peter's shop and what they're doing and getting out and doing their work. So I know they have time crunches to get this money in. And so I just want to say thank you to all of them, because they did do a lot of work. And we, as you know, we had a lot of building in this last year. Okay, so the subordinate levies. So the general fund levy has 3 subordinate levies, also known as earmarked funds, which flag portions of the total general fund levy for specific purposes and redirects those dollars into dedicated and restricted uses. There are restrictions on how the county is allowed to charge the amount earmarked each year for these specific uses. Generally, the amounts redirected out of the general fund must either meet a minimum levy rate, or they must change up or down in the same proportion as the general fund levy as a whole changes. The 3 earmarked funds receiving dollars from the subordinate levies are as follows. The Veterans Relief, this is for relief of honorably discharged veterans and the indigent wives, husbands, widows, widowers, and minor children of such relief, indigent or deceased veterans. The second one is county mental health, for the coordination and provision of community services for mental health services. And the third one is county developmental disabilities. This is for the coordination and provision of community services for persons with developmental disabilities. Next slide, please. So this just shows how those different ones are outlined with the choices in 2021, and then what it would look like for 2022. And I believe the next slide is the last one. So at this time, if there's any other questions for me or from my colleagues that are on today, we are more than happy to answer them, or, you know, and if we can't, we'll get the answer for you before the hearing.
Are there other questions or comments? I don't see or hear any. Thank you, Kathleen.
Well, if you have any questions, if you think of something later today or anytime before the hearing, please let me know, because I want to make sure that you're supported as you go through that process. And I know, you know, we may have to pull in other resources, obviously with budget and others. So please, you know, let me know. We're more than happy to help. And I would also encourage the community to go out to our website and take a look at the recommendations and the packages. And certainly there'll be an opportunity on November 16th for you to provide a public testimony as well to the council. Thank you. And thank you again to Emily, the finance team, all the staff and the electeds. They really put this together.
Right. Thank you all for your participation. It's a big budget, lots of lines, and I'm sure this was a summary. So anyway, okay. I think that concludes then our work session on the budget. And just be prepared as you see, you know, what's next is that we're going to have on November the 15th, we'll take testimony from elected officials. On the 16th, we'll have our continued budget hearing. And it looks like the 17th is also in case we are not able to complete our discussion. There's an overage on the 17th for us to come, you know, with a meeting set for the 17th as well to be able to complete the budget. So if there's anything else, is there anything else for the good of the order as we leave this work session and head into council time? I see nothing. So we will end the work session on the budget, and I will open council time for Wednesday,